Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Freedom Filled Life. And today we are in Lynchburg, Tennessee at the Jack Daniel Distillery. And I am in this wonderful, huge rocking chair. It's great. And we are going on this tour and want to find out all about this American-made product and what it's all about. And I might do a little tasting. Edward, he is strictly no alcohol, which I mostly am too, but I might take a sip here or there, and we'll let you know when it gets done what we thought of the tour. So stay tuned, stay with us as we take you around the Jack Daniel's tour.
About the barrel houses, so 97 altogether, but these are the small barrel houses. These are 20,000 barrels. We have barrel houses that are 40,000 barrels. We have barrel houses that are 60,000 barrel houses. Very rough math from a couple of years ago. This is nowhere near up to date as it is today. There's more than 2.5 million barrels of whiskey on the property at a given time. About 4 years worth of whiskey on the property, right? So again, the world's a big place. We have to have a lot of storage for that whiskey. Right? Okay, so Tennessee whiskey. Now, Jack is a Tennessee whiskey. So to be a Tennessee whiskey, you're going to have to make your whiskey here in the state of Tennessee and then mellow that whiskey through charcoal. And that's called the Lincoln County process. Now, the Lincoln County process, that came here very early in the 1800s. Tennessee whiskey is more of a designation. So around 1941, federally, the government had made rules for producing bourbon. Well, here in Tennessee, here in Lynchburg, we was doing all the bourbon things and the Lincoln County process. So the distillery had petitioned the federal government. Whoever makes that type of decision said, yep, y'all aren't doing enough different from bourbon to be your own style of making whiskey. And of course, that's Tennessee whiskey. So we do make charcoal here, and our first stop is called the Rickyard. So let's go make some charcoal.
If you're on the tour, you can purchase a frozen Jack and Coke or a frozen lemonade and Jack.
Okay, now once these ricks come here, they're going to set outside for 6 months. They're just conditioned here in the open air. Then you're going to take 4 of these ricks and they're going to be placed underneath these hoods. Now these hoods are inspired by the EPA. What they do for us is they're helping us keep the smoke down. These aren't doing anything at all to help make the charcoal. And then of course those ricks will be lit on fire. Now starting the fires, Jack will use an accelerant. A flammable liquid sprayed into those ricks to help them burn. Anybody want to guess what flammable liquid we have here for a fire? Whiskey, right? Not quite, Jack. We're using 140 proof moonshine from the sea. Now, the reason why you're not going to have any kind of a petroleum product here would be because of the flavor. When you're mellowing or you're filtering, that's very much the same thing, and the distillery just doesn't feel like that petroleum. So with all this flammable liquid, the distillery has a fire brigade. This is not it. This is the history force. That one over there is a 1919 American LaFrance. You've got a crank on the front of the truck. That's how you started that truck. On the back, it's on a chain. It's like a bicycle chain driven. This one is a 1928 REO Speedwagon. Maybe you've heard this name. You'll listen to a radio somewhere. That Speedwagon does run and drive, and Jack might use that for parades, firefighter events, and different things like that. Jack actually had learned to make whiskey about 5 miles south of here on a man's farm named Dan Hall. So Jack's mother had passed away. This was very shortly after Jack was born. His dad had remarried, and Jack just didn't get along with his stepmother. So Jack had moved out. Comes to live with Dan before 1860. Well, Jack was born in 1850, so that means that Jack wasn't even a teenager. He moved from home, he lived and he worked for Dan on his farm. And Dan had hired Jack as what you could call a chore boy. Dan was a younger guy who did have children, but those children weren't old enough to do the work he was paying Jack to do, because he had a lot going on. He owned farm. He owned a hardware or a dry goods store. There was a still that would supply that store with whiskey, and he was a Lutheran minister. So of course when Jack comes to live there, well, Jack's a boy, right? And he can see smoke and we're making the whiskey, and that little boy's like, well, what's all that smoke over there? Now this is before the Civil War, this is before emancipation. So Dan had an enslaved man named Nathan Ears Green over the watch and the care of that still. So when it's agreed that Jack would come in and learn how to make whiskey, it was Nearest. Took Jack, he just taught him everything that he knew. Of course, when the Civil War comes, Jack will then hire Nearest as a free man, and then they will make whiskey together their own Dan's farm. So the distillery does give Nearest credit for being that very first distiller. Now when Jack comes here for his own place, his own water, when Nearest is older, he just doesn't care about moving 5 miles away from his home to come here and make some whiskey. So Nearest never works here, but he has a son named George who had grown up with Jack, and George definitely doesn't mind to come here to help Jack make some whiskey. Now Jack comes here because of this water, and this is an ingredient for the whiskey. And you have to have an iron-free source of water. Well, naturally, iron-free water is going to come from limestone. Now, this is a limestone formation, and this does filter the iron away. Why no iron? Well, the iron causes your whiskey to have a murky, a muddy appearance, And it's going to give that whiskey a bitter, even a metallic taste. It's just not going to be the whiskey. Also, the limestone is adding some character to the water because it's here. If you went away from here, go 100 miles away and find a limestone spring, the water there, the water here is not going to taste exactly the same. So to go and bring water back from somewhere else, it's just not going to make whiskey tasting like it's from here. It's going to be just a little bit different. That nice cool air, that's 56 degrees all year long. That's 13 degrees for those of y'all not from around here. And this has never gone dry. So if you've had some Jack, you've had this water. Corn, malted barley, rye, water, yeast, and a barrel. And that's all the ingredients that you have to have, right?
This marker is on the Jack Daniel's tour and at the office. And this says to certify that the Jack Daniel's Distillery has been entered on the National Register of Historic Places by the U.S. Department of the Interior, and gives more description there of that.
Now, Jack never married. Rumors will say that Jack had a girlfriend for every day of the week. So there's at least 7 in the week, right? But there's no children that we know of. So before Jack died, he gave everything to his nephew, and that picture's Mr. Lynn Motma. Now, Lynn was going to make whiskey until Prohibition comes. Prohibition, if you pay attention in history class, made whiskey illegal. So Lynn was forced to shut the distillery down. But Lynn could also see that Prohibition was going to happen, so he's done a little bit of preparation. He owns a hardware store on the town square. That's why you go to the Lynchburg hardware and general store when you want to buy Jack souvenir. All your hats and t-shirts are all down there. He was a very successful mule trader. And when you're making whiskey, that starts out with making flour. So Lynn had the equipment, so he milled flour and sold flour to the public. There's no bootlegging going on for Lynn. Of course, Prohibition did end, and Lynn did start making whiskey again, but flour will burn, and that flour had burned his steel house down. So he had to buy steel, but he also had to rebuild that infrastructure that went along with that production. Of course, he's successful in that. He then gives everything to his sons, and in 1956, his sons sell to Brown Forman, and Brown Forman still owns the distillery today. Jack is Brown Forman's #1 brand, by the way. But this old save, now y'all might think because of all those girlfriends, it was women that he killed Jack, but no, this old save. So Jack was a salesman. He, of course, he owned he did make whiskey here, right? But he owned 2 saloons on the town square. He would even throw parties at his home. And maybe y'all know whiskey, that's a PM time, not an AM time drink, right? So Jack will be the one, he's out later in the evening time, he's promoting his product. The early person would be Lynn. Now, Lynn started working here at about 17 years old. Lynn's a smart guy. He's good with business. He's good at math, right? So by the time he gets to be around 20 years old, Uncle Jack's got him running the business. He's doing the books and doing that type of business. So Lynn would come in, get the day going. Uncle Jack would get to work with everything ready for him. One morning in 1906, Uncle Jack's in the office early. He needs some paperwork from the safe. Jack doesn't use this safe very often. He just never really takes the time to memorize how that combination works. So that morning, he just can't get those letters to work out for him, which is frustrating. Jack had a temper, a little frustration, a little temper. Jack got mad, kicked this safe hard enough to break the big toe of his left foot. He didn't go to the doctor right away. When he gets into the doctor, infection had set in, and they have to amputate that toe. Surgically removed his toe, which doesn't help. Next surgery removes his foot. Next surgery, right at his knee, and eventually all the way to Jack's hip is surgically removed without any help for that infection, right? So October 9th of 1911, Uncle Jack did die from complications of kicking this old safe, right? We do feel like there's a little lesson for you, though. Do y'all see that lesson? Yeah, that's what it works so dang early. Let's go make some whiskey out of it.
We just came out of the distillery. Very interesting part of the tour. Of course, it is off limits for recording. but you can certainly, when you get to where they're making the mash and the smell's coming off, you know what you're smelling.
Make 1 gallon of whiskey, so you've got 4 gallons left over. The leftover is called slop, and that is recycled. It's a little area just right across the hill called Slop Hill. And yes, Jack is very creative naming places around here. There on Slop Hill is where the local farmers will come. They can purchase that protein-rich slop and then feed that to their cows. So there are lots of happy cows around the
All right, we just came out of the second building. Again, not able to film, but it's where the drip is, where the moonshine drips through the charcoal. And when it comes out at the bottom, it is 140 proof. Today's a down day, so there's no whiskey being made today. Looks like the line still runs.
I think everybody's over break right now, so we'll keep on going here. All right, so my favorite question, how many people work here? I always say about half of us. Anywhere he goes like that, right? The better question though would be, where's everybody at? Because we've really not seen many people here at all, right? Well, the world's a big place. You know, you really can't imagine how big the world is because our brain just doesn't work that way. But you could imagine what would a distribution point for the world look like. So yeah, where's that big building? Where's all the, you know, all the empty trucks coming, being filled with cases and leaving? You're not going to build that on the side of the hill, right? You're going to find a flat spot, which is about 2 miles away from here, where you'll find a very large, very modern facility down that way. So this is where the liquid gets made, and the liquid then goes by truck there for barrels, bottles, all those other things are all going to happen down there, right? So tasting whiskey, but we're in a dry county. So this goes way back. Tennessee was one of the very first states to go dry. So Tennessee went dry, the nation went dry, the nation said, oh, that's a bad idea, goes wet again. But Tennessee was already one of the dry states. So it was Liam. Liam had ran for the legislature. He was able to be elected, and he was able to start a bill that allowed Tennessee to make whiskey in only 3 different counties. Lincoln County is south of here. Moore County is where we are now, and then Coffee County is to the north of us. 3 counties for a long time, 1995, and the distillery had petitioned the state. We think we're ready for a bottle shop. States thought so too. States said, okay, yep, you're one of the biggest whiskey producers in the world. You're okay to sell a bottle of your whiskey on your property. A few years after that, the state said, okay, we're going to open up for every county in Tennessee. Wet counties, dry counties, everybody can make whiskey. Everybody can sell a bottle of whiskey on their property. And then just a very few years ago, the state finally said, okay, yeah, we got dry counties making whiskey. We got dry counties selling bottles. We think it's going to be okay. If you're in a dry county making whiskey, you can offer your guest an educational sample of that agricultural product that you made in your distillery. So yes, this is a sample of whiskey. We do not want you sharing because that's the way Tennessee wants us to do it, and we want y'all to leave here responsibly served, right? And we got a lot of folks who are not wearing those wristbands either. But let's go taste some of this whiskey. The crash course for you here. You want to start off with a little sip of your water. And what you do with your water, you are cleansing your palate. You are tasting something that's familiar to you. When we taste, we'll do a couple of things. We're going to start off by swirling your sample inside of your glass, which is going to help to incorporate some oxygen into your sample. You want to sniff the sample. And this is not the John Wayne show. This is not us gulping whiskey. We are sipping whiskey, right? So have a little bit, let that little sip activate your taste buds. The next little bit, and the very subtle aroma, subtle flavor showing through for you. Starting on the left, your left, with old number 7, working our way down. And I know those over here probably can't see this bottle, and you maybe can't see these bottles. So Gentleman Jack starts off as old number 7. You put that old number 7 back through charcoal to get the Gentleman Jack. Not the 10 feet. That's not that same area, right? This is going to be about 3 feet, that same type. If you put too much charcoal, you're going to take too much of that flavor away, okay? Now, Gentleman Jack is a little bit lighter than the old number 7, okay? So if you remember talking about the barrels, if the color and flavor is the barrel, right? If you take some of one away, you take some of the other away. So if you take some of the color, you take some of the flavor. All right, now the next one down is the single barrel select. And that is exactly what it says it is. A single barrel that's been selected from all the other barrels to go into bottles all by itself. This will be unique per barrel. So no barrel is going to taste exactly the same. The next one down is, it's different in 2 ways. It's different because it's the rye whiskey, right? Made mostly rye. 70% rye. It's different because it's bonded whiskey. So, Bottle and Bond is from a long time ago. The Bottle and Bond Act of 1897 was the government's first kind of step into regulation of making whiskey. That regulation said that the whiskey had to be made by a single distiller during a single season, stored in a government bonded warehouse for at least 4 years. Okay? Now, single distiller, that's obvious, one distiller. A single season very basically means you had to use fresh grain. You couldn't go to Farmer Joe and say, hey, I hear you got a lot of grain left over, you didn't feed to the cows last year. Let me buy that stale grain, I can make some whiskey out of it. Can't do that. All of our warehouses are bonded. That's just us promising to pay tax on the whiskey. 4 years, you know how long that is, right? And it's going to be bottled up at 100 proof. So that's the bonded definition. And the last 2 are the desserts, right? These are the liqueurs. These are flavors added to the old number 7. We've got honey, made with honey. We've got apple, made with apple. Granny Smith, Red Delicious, Macintosh apples. These both start as old number 7, and then we put the flavor into that whiskey. But y'all sniff and sip while we talk here. These are both going to be 70 proof. That's 35% alcohol. These are both going to be better if you can keep them chilled. Have them in the refrigerator, in the freezer, over ice. Honey is good with like sweet tea. It's good with lemonade. The apple is good with like Sprite, cranberry juice, maybe a little Sprite. A little splash of cranberry juice in there. Definitely thank y'all for coming. If you ever get close enough, come and see us again. We'd love to have you again. Tell your family, tell your friends. The World Wide Web is a great way to let us know how we've done today. TripAdvisor, Yelp. I'm Anthony. My bosses do read that. If you had a bad time, they could be anybody else's name. They're not going to know. Right? Let's get y'all back to the front up here.
we have completed the Jack Daniel's Distillery tour in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and it was amazing. It was a pretty good walk and a lot of up and down stairs. So if that's an issue, you might want to take that into account. So there were 2 or 3 places where we couldn't film in and videoed. I tried to make note of those for you, but it was fascinating. And buddy, you can smell the process as you go through these different buildings. If you've never had anything and you've never smelled Tennessee whiskey at all, it's going to be eye-opening for you. When we got to the tasting, I am not a huge drinker at all. I did take a sip of each one of the 7 tastings that you had. I actually had never, I had the honey, I think was my favorite. The apple was good, but I think the honey was my favorite. But it's mostly all too strong for me. Edward doesn't drink, so he sat there and sipped on his water while they did the tasting. There was a lot of really good information. So this is really a neat tour. If you don't even touch alcohol, it's a neat tour. Now, if you're a recovering alcoholic, I might not recommend that you do the tour simply because you are smelling along the process of the alcohol. But other than that, I would totally have this on everybody's to-do list. So join us again here on the Freedom Filled Life as we have further adventures. And you never know where we might pop up next.